The beginning of trust night was quiet in the city, but Sandra could not hear peace in her own heart. The lights outside her window blurred like restless stars, and she kept thinking about the heavy days behind her. People often told her she was strong, but in truth, she was tired of carrying everything on her own. Every smile she gave in front of cameras felt heavy. Every word in interviews felt like a mask she had to wear. She longed for something real, something steady, something that did not demand perfection from her. That was when Keanu came into her story again. They had worked together before, years back, when their lives were younger and less complicated. She remembered his calmness, the way he never tried to take the spotlight, and the way his silence sometimes spoke more than the words of others. Still, she never expected him to be near her at this moment in her life, when everything felt like it was breaking apart inside her. The evening they met again was not planned. It was at a small gathering, nothing fancy, just friends in a quiet corner of a restaurant. Sandra almost chose not to go because her mind was clouded with doubts and her chest felt too heavy to pretend. But she went anyway, forcing herself to step outside her own shadows. And there, across the room, she saw him sitting alone, relaxed. As if the world was not rushing him, Keanu noticed her too. His eyes lifted, and though his lips barely moved, his presence felt like a hand reaching out. He did not rush over, did not shout her name or demand attention. Instead, he simply waited, leaving the choice to her. It was a small act, but to Sandra, it mattered, because for once, someone did not ask anything from her. When she finally walked over, her voice felt small, almost fragile. "It's been a long time," she said. He nodded, his smile soft, almost shy, and answered, "Too long." They sat together, and the conversation did not push, did not force. It flowed in a quiet rhythm, like two people who knew how to listen, more than they needed to speak. As the night grew, others at the gathering laughed loudly, but their table remained calm. Keanu asked simple questions about her family, about the books she was reading, about the little things that made her days brighter. He never asked about her struggles, never pressed on the wounds she carried, and in that silence, she felt something rare dash safety. Then came the moment that would stay with her forever. When they stood up to leave, Sandra fumbled with her bag. The strap broke, and everything inside spilled across the floor papers. A notebook filled with her private thoughts, and a small photo she carried for comfort. People around them glanced, some even laughed quietly. Sandra bent down, her cheeks burning, wishing she could vanish. But Keanu knelt down beside her without hesitation. He picked up the notebook, not opening it, not even glancing at what was inside, and handed it to her with both hands, as if it was something sacred. When he saw the photo, he paused for just a second, then returned it gently, saying nothing. No judgment, no questions. It was a small act, almost invisible to the world. But to Sandra, it felt like someone telling her, "Your pain is safe here." In that one, simple gesture, he carried her trust, without asking for it, without demanding she explain. That night, as she walked home, her heart felt lighter. For the first time in weeks, she believed that maybe she did not have to walk alone, through every storm, because sometimes, one small act of kindness could carry more weight than all the promises in the world. And Sandra knew this was only the beginning of something that would test both their strength, their patience, and their hearts in ways they could not yet imagine. When silence became a bridge that next morning, Sandra woke with a strange calmness. She remembered how Keanu had picked up her things without a single glance, how he had treated her private thoughts with respect. It was not the act itself, but the silence that followed. Silence can feel heavy when people use it to judge, but his silence felt like trust. She poured herself coffee and sat by the window, replaying the moment again and again. She asked herself why it mattered so much. Maybe because she had been surrounded for years by people who always wanted something, an answer, a headline, a story to twist. No one simply stood beside her without asking. Except last night. Later. That week, she found herself on a set, filming under bright lights. The cameras caught every detail, and the crew moved quickly, with clipped voices. Sandra tried to focus, but her mind wandered back to that quiet night. When the director called for a break, she walked outside to breathe. The air was sharp, and her chest tightened as memories of past failures whispered in her head. Just then, a voice spoke, low and calm. "You okay?" She turned, and there he was, Keanu, leaning against the wall, holding a cup of tea. She almost laughed at the timing. "Do you always show up when I need to breathe?" she asked softly. He shrugged, smiling. "Maybe it's coincidence, or maybe I just know the signs." They stood side by side, neither rushing to fill the space. Minutes stretched out, but it did not feel awkward. It felt like standing on a bridge between storms, the kind where the silence holds everything steady. Sandra realized how rare that was. Silence that didn't demand explanation. Silence that gave her room to breathe. After a while, she whispered, "Sometimes I think I don't belong in this life anymore." It slipped out before she could stop herself. Her voice cracked, and her hands trembled. Keanu didn't react with shock or pity. He didn't rush to tell her she was wrong or that everything was fine. Instead, he nodded slowly and said, "Then maybe it's not about belonging to the life. Maybe it's about building one that belongs to you." His words struck her deeply. So simple, yet they carried a weight she could not ignore. She felt the sting of tears but did not look away. That night, she received a message from him. Just, "Remember, storms pass. The ground under you stays." She read it 3 times before setting her phone down, her lips trembling into a small, almost reluctant smile. Days turned into weeks, and Sandra noticed how often he would quietly appear, not in the loud center of her world, but at the edges, where the shadows usually lived. He would hold the door when she was too distracted to notice, or he would simply sit with her during breaks, without forcing conversation. One evening, after a long day, she told him, "You're too quiet sometimes." He laughed softly, and, "You're too loud in your heart." She tilted her head, unsure whether to be offended or comforted. But the warmth in his eyes made her choose the latter, and so the silence between them became a bridge, carrying unspoken truths neither had the courage yet to name. But in that bridge, Sandra felt her heart learning something new, that maybe trust was not built in grand speeches, but in the small spaces where someone chose to stay. What she did not know was that storms were already forming around them. Storms that would test if the bridge could hold. The storm that tested them. The storm came sooner than Sandra expected. It began with whispers, small, sharp lines in magazines, questions from reporters that carried poison beneath polite smiles. They asked why she had been seen with Keanu so often. They twisted the story, painting her as fragile, desperate, and leaning on him like a lost soul. For Sandra, it hurt, because they were not entirely wrong. She was leaning on him, but not in the way they suggested. It was not about weakness. It was about trust. But the world outside did not care about the truth. The world loved drama, and the storm fed on it. One afternoon, after a long day of filming, she opened her phone to find her name spread across headlines. They wrote about her secret breakdown and how Keanu was her silent guardian. The words stung. She sat in her car, staring at the screen, her hands shaking. When Keanu knocked gently on the window, she quickly wiped her eyes. He opened the door without saying a word and slid into the seat beside her. The silence filled the car, heavy and fragile, until finally she whispered, "They're making me look weak. They're making you look like a savior I don't deserve." He looked at her, steady and calm. "I don't care what they write," he said. "Do you?" "Of course I care," she snapped, her voice breaking. "This is my life, my work, my name. Everything I've built, they can destroy it with lies." For the first time, his eyes hardened. "Then let them write." truth isn't built in headlines. It's built in how you stand when the noise gets loud. Her breath caught. His words felt like both a challenge and a comfort. She wanted to believe him, but fear clung to her chest. The storm grew stronger in the days that followed. Paparazzi followed them, flashing cameras into their faces when they left restaurants, or even when they walked down quiet streets. Rumors swirled, some cruel enough to make her cry alone at night, and yet, through it all, Keanu stayed. Not loudly, not defensively, not with anger. He stayed in the same quiet way he always had. One night, when she felt the weight crushing her, he showed up at her door, with nothing but 2 mugs and a bag of tea leaves. They sat on the floor of her living room, the city lights glowing through the window. He poured the tea, his hand steady, and handed her the cup. "Storms pass," he said again, as if repeating a promise. But then something shifted. For the first time, she saw the storm in him, a flash of doubt in his eyes, a tiredness in his shoulders. He was not untouched by the noise. He carried it too, though he tried to hide it. That night, she asked, "Why do you stay when you could walk away?" He looked at her for a long time, before answering, "Because trust isn't something I put down when it gets heavy." His words broke something open inside her. The tears she had been holding spilled out, but this time she did not hide them. She let him see her, raw and unguarded, and he did not turn away. Still, even as the storm howled louder outside their walls, Sandra began to wonder how much could trust endure before it cracked under the weight of the world. The storm was not done with them, it was only beginning. The breaking point storm outside grew wild, and Sandra felt trapped in it. The noise did not stop. Every day new headlines came, sharper and colder than the last. Friends she thought she could trust asked her strange questions. Even people on set whispered when she walked by. She tried to smile through it, but her chest carried a heaviness she could not shake. Keanu stayed close, but his silence, once her comfort, began to hurt her too. She wanted him to fight back, to say something to the world, to stand up loudly for her. Instead, he kept still, calm, and patient. One night, after another cruel article spread across every screen, Sandra broke. She slammed her phone down on the table and turned to him. Her voice was sharp, almost trembling with anger. "Why don't you say anything? Why don't you fight back for me? Don't you care what they're doing to us?" His face was calm, but his eyes showed the weight he carried. "I do care," he said softly, "but shouting at the storm doesn't make it stop raining." His words felt like a wall, and she couldn't break through it. Tears blurred her sight. "You don't understand. You can stand in silence because people already believe you're strong. But when I stay silent, they call me weak. I need you to say something, anything." For the first time, he looked away, as if searching for the right words. "If I speak for you, they'll think you cannot stand on your own. But if I stay beside you, maybe you'll see that you're not alone. Which matters more?" Sandra's heart cracked at his question, because she did not know the answer. The next days were colder between them. They still met, still sat together. But the warmth was gone. Silence no longer felt like a bridge. It felt like a wall. Then came the breaking point. One evening, a cruel reporter shouted questions at her in the street. He asked about her past, about mistakes she thought were buried, about her worth as a woman and as a person. Cameras flashed as she froze, unable to speak. Keanu stepped forward, placing himself between her and the reporter. For a moment, Sandra thought he would finally fight back with words. But instead, he simply raised his hand, blocking the cameras, and guided her away. She followed, trembling, until they turned a corner and the noise was gone. Then she pulled her arm free, her voice shaking with hurt. "That's it. You just walk me away. You let them tear me apart, and you don't say a word." Keanu looked at her, his face unreadable. "I chose not to give them my anger. I chose you instead." But to her, it felt like a choice that cost too much. She turned from him, tears burning her eyes. Maybe I need more than your silence. Those words cut deep between them. They did not speak for days after, and in those quiet days, Sandra felt the fear she had tried so hard to ignore, the fear that even trust, once broken, might never be the same again. Yet somewhere deep inside, she also felt something else, a question she did not want to face. Was the storm tearing them apart, or was it testing them to see if they were strong enough to hold? The fragile threads passed like shadows, and the distance between Sandra and Keanu grew heavy. They still crossed paths, but their eyes did not hold as long as before. Their silences, once a comfort, now carried sharp edges. Sandra wondered if trust could be lost in silence as easily as it was built in it. One evening, she sat alone in her apartment, scrolling through the endless flood of articles and comments. The words blurred together, but their cruelty cut deep. "She is broken," one headline said. "He only stays out of pity," another claimed. Sandra closed her phone and pressed her face into her hands, whispering, "Maybe they're right." That was when her phone buzzed. A simple message from Keanu. "Are you safe?" She stared at the words. It was small, but it carried weight. Because, even when they were apart, even when their trust felt fragile, he still asked the one question no one else ever did. "Are you safe?" She typed back, "I don't know." Then she hesitated, unsure if she wanted to send it. But her heart pushed her thumb forward. Minutes later, a knock sounded on her door. She opened it to find him standing there, his expression quiet but firm. He stepped inside without asking, but not in a way that pushed tonely, in a way that said, "I am here if you let me be." They sat across from each other, the air thick with unspoken words. Finally, Sandra broke the silence. "I don't know if I can keep doing this. The noise, the whispers, the way people twist everything. It feels like I'm drowning, and your silence. It makes me feel like I'm drowning alone." His jaw tightened, his eyes searching hers. "You think my silence means I don't care. But silence is how I fight. It's how I keep from feeding the fire. But if my way hurts you, then maybe I've been carrying the wrong shield." Her breath caught. No one had ever admitted that to her, that maybe their way of protecting wasn't what she needed. She whispered, "Then what do we do?" He leaned forward, his voice steady. "We listen, not to the world, not to the noise. We listen to each other. If my silence hurts you, tell me. If your words cut me, I'll tell you. And maybe between us, we can weave something stronger than the storm." For the first time in weeks, Sandra felt something shift. Not the storm outside, but the thread between them, fragile, yes, but still there. She lowered her eyes, tears slipping down her face. "I'm scared," she admitted. He reached across the table, not grabbing, not demanding, just placing his hand near hers. "Me too. But being scared doesn't mean we stop. It means we hold tighter." Her hand trembled, but she placed it on his. The warmth spread through her like a fragile flame fighting the cold. That night, they did not solve everything. They did not silence the world, and they did not erase their fears. But they found one fragile thread of trust still unbroken. And sometimes, one thread is enough to begin weaving again. What neither of them knew was that soon, they would face a test, greater than the noise of headlines, one that would demand not silence or words, but action that could change everything. The moment of choice's fragile thread they held onto was tested sooner than either imagined. It happened on a night when Sandra was scheduled to appear at a charity event. It was meant to be simple, just a speech about resilience and kindness, a chance to remind herself and others of hope. But the press had turned the event into a spectacle. Cameras lined the entrance, their flashes like lightning. Whispers moved through the crowd before she even arrived. Sandra sat in her car outside the venue, her hands gripping the steering wheel. Her chest felt tight, her breath uneven. She whispered to herself, "I can't do this. Not tonight." The door opened, and Keanu slid into the seat beside her. He didn't dress for the cameras. He dressed simply, as he always did, without caring how the world judged. He looked at her, calm but firm. You don't have to do this for them. But if you go in, do it for you. She turned her face toward him, eyes brimming with tears. And if I fail? He leaned closer, his voice low, steady. Then fail standing. Because standing, even when you're shaking, is braver than hiding. His words planted something deep inside her. Not certainty, not courage, fully formed, but a choice. And with that choice, she opened the door. The cameras exploded the moment they stepped out. Voices shouted questions, cruel ones, desperate ones, questions meant to break her. Sandra's knees almost buckled, but Keanu's presence beside her felt like an anchor. He didn't block the cameras this time, didn't shield her like before. Instead, he matched his steps with hers, letting her decide if she would walk or turn back. Inside the hall, the lights dimmed, and Sandra stood on stage, her speech trembling in her hands. The crowd waited. The whispers pressed against her chest. She glanced at Keanu, sitting near the front, his eyes steady on her, not demanding, not forcing, just waiting. She drew a deep breath. I was told tonight to speak about resilience. But standing here, I don't feel strong. I feel exposed. And maybe that's the truth. We don't often say that resilience doesn't mean being unbreakable. It means breaking and still choosing to stand. Her voice cracked, but she did not stop. Tonight, I choose to stand. Not because I'm fearless, but because I'm scared. And that's okay. The room fell into silence. No whispers, no laughter, only stillness. When she stepped down from the stage, her legs shaking, the first face she saw was his. Keanu rose, meeting her halfway, and though he said nothing, his eyes carried everything: respect, pride, and the weight of trust that had survived the storm. But the night wasn't finished. As they left the hall, another ambush of cameras waited. Someone shouted a cruel remark, loud enough to sting. Sandra froze, her courage flickering. This time, Keanu spoke. His voice was calm but sharp, carrying through the chaos. Enough. The crowd stilled for a moment, shocked by a single word. He didn't argue, didn't fuel the fire, just one word, enough to draw a line. Then he turned to Sandra, his hand steady as he guided her away. Inside her chest, something shifted. He had stayed silent for so long, but when it mattered most, he chose to speak. Not for himself, not for the world, but for her. That night, back in the quiet of her home, she whispered, "Thank you." He looked at her, his expression soft. "Not for carrying you," he said, "for walking beside you." She nodded, her heart heavy and light, all at once. Because now she understood, trust was not about who carried more. It was about choosing, again and again, not to let go. Yet deep down, she knew their story wasn't finished. Because love, respect, and resilience are always tested one last time when the world least expects it. The quiet victory weeks after the charity event felt different. The storm outside still roared, but Sandra noticed the way people's eyes began to change when they looked at her. Some still whispered, but others listened. Some still judged, but others nodded with quiet respect. And most of all, she noticed the way her own reflection changed. She no longer saw someone broken. She saw someone standing, even when her legs trembled. Keanu remained by her side, never too close to take her strength, never too far to leave her alone. Their bond was not loud, not dramatic. It was steady, built from countless small acts, sharing tea on quiet nights, walking side by side in crowded streets, choosing silence when words could wound, choosing words when silence could not protect. Then came the moment that proved everything they had endured had meaning. She was asked to give an interview, a live one, the kind she usually dreaded. In the past, she would have smiled politely and let others twist her words. But this time, she wanted to speak her truth. She sat under the studio lights, her hands folded in her lap. The interviewer leaned forward, eyes sharp. "People say you've only survived this season because of him," the interviewer said, gesturing toward Keanu, who sat quietly off stage. "They say you leaned on him because you were too weak to stand alone. What do you say to that?" The old Sandra might have cried, or stayed silent, or let anger break her. But now she breathed deeply and lifted her chin. "I did lean on him," she said softly. "But leaning on someone doesn't make you weak. It means you trust them enough to share the weight. And sometimes, trust is the strongest thing you can carry." The interviewer blinked, surprised. The audience grew silent. Sandra went on, her voice steady, though her heart raced. "I'm not ashamed of needing help. I'm proud that I found someone who respected me enough to give it without asking for anything back. Strength is not always about standing alone. Sometimes, strength is about letting someone stand beside you." Her words spread like ripples across the room, and in that moment, Keanu's quiet eyes met hers from across the stage. Nothing needed to be said. The truth had already spoken. After the interview, they walked together into the night. The city buzzed around them, but the storm no longer felt as sharp. Sandra whispered, "I used to think trust was fragile, like glass. But now I see it's more like a bridge. It bends in the wind, it creaks in the storm, but if you keep walking across it, it holds." Keanu smiled faintly, his voice calm as ever. "Then let's keep walking." And so they did. Not as hero and savior, not as broken and whole, but as two people carrying the same fragile, powerful thing, trust. In the end, it was not the headlines that defined them, not the storms, not even the silence. It was one small act, given freely, carried through every trial, that grew into something unshakable. And when Sandra looked at Keanu beside her, she knew sometimes the greatest victories are not the ones shouted to the world, but the ones kept quietly in the heart.